Hey Trails Collective, Ian here. In February, I had the opportunity to run a pretty great event in one of the strongest trail running communities in the Northeast, which is my native state of Pennsylvania. To get there though, we're going to talk a little bit about two of the finer aspects of trail running. That's snot and boulders. Let's talk about snot first. So while a good chunk of that happens to slide right down your throat as smooth as the Pennsylvania's hillside slider.
Frozen Snot with the hillside slider.
A good chunk of that's going to slip right out of that schnoz. And in some cases, with a little help from Michelle and Deborah in taking in one of their videos from the C&O Canal Path 50 in this clip. Good form, Michelle and Deborah, good form. As runners, snot is just part of the game. Now the savvy viewer may say, yeah, Ian, but what about said snot or nasal discharge in the winter? Well, savvy viewer, I'm glad you asked. Let's check it out and see what happens. Let's take a look at maybe what happened with this guy.
Check the snotsicles on this. Oh my God, that's absolutely horrible.
That guy is awesome. But dude, that was disgusting. I don't think I ever want to watch that clip again. So that brings us only momentarily back to the event or topic of discussion, which is the race in PA. Celebrating snot, rocks, boulders in the winter since 2013 is the Frozen Snot. What's with the Frozen Snot?
It's an iconic race. It's the most difficult climbing that you're going to do in 13 miles. Well, more like 10 miles because the first mile and a half is flat, so you got to be here.
Yeah, Chris told me about it like 3 years ago, and it sells out like right away, like in like 5-6 hours or so. So yeah, I'm just like super stoked for the climbs. And it's like a dope part of PA, especially. So as a PA race, the terrain here is just like none other part of PA. It's so sick.
But for many of you in my home and native state of Pennsylvania, I know what you think of when you think of Pennsylvania in winter. You think of, it's that time when you were a kid, standing behind the barricades with Opa in Philadelphia, watching as the mummer in a medieval costume took a quick sip from a bottle before staggering and collapsing on the ground, while a small man carrying a sword, dressed in costume, appearing to be sitting on what appears to be a small horse, stood idly by. But to some, we reflect on how we'll keep the trail fire alive through the winter months. But some may also be uncomfortable with the thought of running in the winter. And isn't that dangerous? Well, yes it can be. As evidenced in this now infamous clip from Coin 6 News with Chelsea and Michael out for a nice stroll in the winter wonderland of whatever city that was in. Yes. Ooh, yeah, clearly Chelsea's not okay. But for those of us who are trail runners, and hardy ones at that, we tend to assume such risks. And we're not just talking about pretty wonderland city streets here. We're talking about adding in the trails and boulder fields. But to assure you that it's all fine and good, let's take a look at this clip and hear a bit about technical running from one of the best, most technical trail runners probably the Northeast has ever seen. And that would be Ben Nephew in this clip here from Mountain Peak Fitness. Let's take a listen.
You can kind of apply your training to a really hard trail that's really fun to run. Like, it just, for me, I get a lot more pleasure out of running trails faster. It's just, for the really technical stuff, it's really exciting, especially on the descents.
Say Devil's Pass. I mean, what are your thoughts? Is there fear that ever comes into your mind? Are you just in a flow? Are you taking risks?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because with the really technical descents, if you take a fall, it's probably not going to be really worth it. Because it's going to slow you down for the rest of the run, whether it's from major injury or just the fact that you're now so tentative.
Sweet Jesus! Yeah, that's what can happen, and that's just talking about dry rock in the summer. But this here, this is what Frozen Snot is all about. run in the hills of the Bald Eagle State Forest outside of Lock Haven in the winter. The Frozen Snot is not for the faint of running hearts. With a section of climb names including Barb's Kiss My Ass, Gut Check, The Beast, you know this course has character. Let's listen to a little clip from Matt Lipsy on maybe some of the terrain.
How many climbs are there?
Too many. That's a good number.
Yeah, I'd agree, Matt. This clip has this course rather has some hills. For the two course configurations, one being 8.5 miles, one being 13.5, for a gain of I think it's 3,800 in the 8.5 mile and 5,800 in the 13.5 miles. This course has a lot of gain and loss, and pretty steep at that. And particularly when you think it pretty much comes in only 4 major climbs in the longer distance. Each one of them picking up about 1,000 feet in roughly a half mile to a mile distance gain. So that's some pretty steep clips. And it's probably the only event that I've experienced that I'm aware of that's tough enough to literally tear the crotch out of your tights.
What? Holy shit! What happened to your pants, brah? Oh my God. Come over here, let me see that thing.
He needed a little bit more venting.
Did you like get hot and rip those open or what?
The event stages at a Army Reserve Center, and what's evident from the moment you enter is the feeling of community. And this is something that I felt time and again in the Pennsylvania trail scene. A few hundred similarly spirited individuals checked in by a well-oiled registration machine, pre-race food, both hot and cold on a buffet table, partners selling PA trail swag, and a clearly dedicated RD, Luke Ebeling, tending to pre-race logistics. With a family there to greet and start the race and greet finishers on their arrival home. It really does feel like community. And not all technical, the race starts and finishes with a bit over a mile, actually 1.3 to be precise, over a hard pack or chip seal surface. It's really quite perfect to let the pack thin out of the gates and ahead of the first ascent, which bottlenecks into your first fairly steep climb of the day. One of the two Conestoga Cowboys, the opening hardpack mile was probably a bit more concerning than the big climbs to follow.
Most terrified for the run at the beginning and at the end. It's like a mile and a half road. So
it's the raw nature, the adventure, and the big climbs which most look forward to and celebrate after. In 2020, it was probably, I think, one of the faster runnings that the race has seen. The conditions were really quite perfect. I think we had an opening temperature of about 14 degrees, so a bit cold, but the sun came out and it was just beautiful. The sky was clear, the sunrise over our backs as you went up that opening ascent in Boulder Field was pretty remarkable, and there was only a bit of snow up high with little exposed ice. After the opening road section, the course forks left. In my head at the time, I think I was thinking, well, going up, similar to an elevator, as I knew the beast or the trademark climbs of the course were about to begin. That opening climb, I think, ascends roughly 1,000 feet in only a half mile, with a boulder field in the top 2/3, and it tops out with a point called Barb's Kiss My Ass.
KMA stand
Go
for?
fast, slide on your ass. KMA, kiss my ass. Because this lady named Barb, she saw how the hill was, and everybody pretty much knew that it already sucked. And if you've been on it, I mean, you knew it sucked. But Barb, who, I don't even know if she's ever even done it, but she was like, I mean, yeah, but like it's kind of soft because you can make it worse. And then Jeff Stover, the original race director, was like, fine, Barb, we'll make it tougher. And then he named it after her. That way, when everybody was on it, they could just say, like, you know, they knew who was in charge of the pain.
And it was evident right from the get-go that the climbs were going to be steep and technical enough where there's not really going to be much running on those ascents and even some of the descents. As we got to the top opening boulder field, the sun was really rising and illuminating the hillside behind us, which flanked the Beast boulder climb. And it was really just a beautiful time to be there and a beautiful spot on the course. After a brief traverse, you begin to immediately you lose roughly half of the elevation gain that you just made up.
Ascents are pretty scary. Yeah, actually more difficult than the ascents. You just gotta be careful, make sure you don't trip.
What you also get exposed to is the ropes that are there to help control or slow your flow. And I think it also speaks to just the devotion and the commitment to the race queue and the RD, race crew and the RD to get out there and be setting so many ropes for safety. I know some runners opted to or didn't really find comfort in using them. I thought that it was kind of cool and it really allowed you to keep your flow up. Some of the images I got throughout the race of those roped descents come out looking pretty flat in the videos, but just know that there's some pretty steep sections there with some pretty loose rock, and the rope actually can be pretty helpful. After that initial descent, you start up into the goat path, and this I thought was just a really beautiful ascent. Not much underbrush in the forest. Good job, guys. Fairly soft, mossy footing, and I remember thinking this would make a really beautiful descent if we were to reverse the course. And what I didn't know, or I wasn't quite prepared for, was that was on deck. You get up at the top of the goat path, you make a right turn, and you start into this really beautiful, flowy, non-technical descent. And I was really surprised in that moment. I was just envisioning that this was going to be a fully technical course, and that's just what I was prepared for. And what I actually found was, no, I mean, there's some sections where you really flow in the course, and it was just awesome running. After a brief section called the gut check, there's a couple of creek crossings, section with denser, tighter flow through a forest, and then you would merge at what's called the Bacon Station aid station. And this also, I think, speaks to the fun and the community of trail running. I mean, how many half marathons are you going to get out there in the middle of the woods? You're going to find just an amazing crew of dedicated volunteers, middle of the winter, frying up bacon. And so this was also evident as you went through the rest of the course. It was just how wonderful a community it was. A lot of the volunteers at spots throughout the course had small bonfires going. Some were in sections where maybe the sun was penetrating through, and it was really evident there was just a great crew out there. After a number of milder ascents and sharper descents, marked by occasional snowfields, rope sections, and a few loose boulders, which I spent some time kicking and which my big toes are still reminding me of, as well as a gash or a contusion on my shin. The loop basically emerges at the Zindel aid station. A lot of good energy. I think a couple people tried to avoid the creek crossing there and ended up falling in. I was lucky enough to find a good log and stayed pretty dry. But that takes you into where the 8.5 mile distance heads for home, and the 13.5 miles splits off into the second loop. And then that second loop, what you go right into is the infamous boulder beast, or the beast climb. And it was that beast of the climb that really, I think, people look forward to, and it becomes probably what really typifies their epic adventure of the day. Whether it be for Chris, one of the other two Conestoga Cowboys. Is there a point on the course that's kind of a favorite?
Mile 8, the beast.
Mile 8, the beast,
Yeah, about 1,200 feet, just boulders. Hope you don't fall.
Nicole, who was the leader of the long distance.
But I actually really like the beast.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part.
That's like the marquee event.
Yeah. That part's fun because, first of all, it's beautiful, and second of all, it's like a solid climb, and then when it looks like you're going to be done, it seems like there's another half that was just somehow buried in the trees.
Right.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So
That's
cool.
what they were saying too, the same thing. Like, it's just like, oh, it's over, and then you're like, no, it continues to just, suck the life out of your legs.
Whether it be the Russian sporting ventilated jorts.
My favorite part was climb after last aid station.
Okay, the beast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot.
The beast. It starts into what's another exposed boulder climb. Going into the race, I was just envisioning this never-ending looking boulder field. And while it's a pretty signature open boulder field, it really didn't prove to be that long. I think the core section of the boulder field I don't know what the distance was, but it really doesn't make up the bulk of the ascent. It's a relatively short boulder field, and then you move into the upper portion where the climb just continues to go. After traversing a bit of snow at the summit and a shorter technical descent, the course is mostly wonderful, flowy single track from there back to Zindel. You pass the beautiful Keller Reservoir, some old infrastructure there at the base, and you re-arrive at Zindel Park Aid Station. Good energy there, a lot of spectators, runners coming in from both distances. You can see others headed over to their epic adventure on the Beast. And so once you hit there, you know that there's 1.3 miles to go. It's that hard pack, mild descent into the finish, really quite smooth. For anybody that have anything left in their legs, you can really hammer, I guess, and that goes through straight back into the reserve center finish. And they're back into the post-race festivities, people sharing their adventures, the hot food again on the buffet table. Really just, again, wonderful scene. I think in hindsight, in my experience in the 2020 running, I'm left to just wonder what it would be like to experience that course under really more severe, significant winter conditions. Under snow, under ice, I imagine that really changes the nature of the game. Maybe some year I'll be able to go back, but I'm guessing it would be pretty intense. The elevation gain per mile is probably as significant as anything you'll find anywhere, and it's really pretty amazing. I didn't feel like any of the climbs were that long though, where it, I think, proved to be as intense as I was thinking it was going to be. I'm used to having some background and experience living in more mountainous areas where the climbs are really long. You're looking at 3, 4, 5, even 6 mile climbs that just seem to go and go forever. These climbs here at Frozen Snot were really steep and really burly. They're only like a mile long. So if you're really hammering, I imagine that would really get to you. But again, you can only hammer so much through the boulder fields, and they're only so long. And again, what really I think took me by surprise was how many beautiful, runny, flowy sections were really out there. I can say in not having many training miles under my legs at this point, that my legs, particularly my quads, were really crushed for about a week and a half after the race. So that's always a beautiful earned feeling. So it really, I think, did speak to the severity of the course. Speaking to the course organization, the course markings were solid. I don't think there was ever a time where I felt like I was questioning whether I was on course or not. The event volunteers were great, from registration to aid stations to course marshals. Everybody in a good mood. Clearly, it was just a great community to be in. Hot food before and after, as well as some special treats.
Tell me about the cake.
Buttercream icing. Really complements the raspberry filling.
And the swag, including this sweet retro mug. Yeah, that gem, pretty awesome, as well as this sweet puffy vest, which probably was eating up the race budget and margin right there, which again I think really speaks to the commitment and the devotion of the whole team. Really is a gem and an event, and I think that's really reflected that in 2018, the event capped or sold out in 14 hours. In 2019, under 4 hours. In 2020, this past year, it capped in 1 hour and 45 minutes. At that rate of popularity, I imagine it's going to go in minutes for 2021, or they'll have to switch to some sort of lottery system. So if it's something that's on your radar, considering it, I highly recommend the event. Just be prepared to get on there and it selling out in short order. We'll give you the heads up for the Trails Collective next year when registration is about to go live. Huge thanks to wonderful RD Luke Ebeling pouring yourself into the event. It really shows. To the Pennsylvania trail community who fill the ranks. Indeed, you're a pretty incredible community, and I think it speaks to why PA is probably our strongest in the region in terms of trail events and numbers. Thanks for tuning in. Join us for the next round, which should be the Mount Tammany 10 at the end of March, and we'll chat more soon.
I gotta ask you, what's it like to be to run in jorts?
It's awesome.
What's your favorite thing about the course?
You don't have to spend a lot of money on your gear.
What's the secret recipe in the soup?
I'm not telling you.
That's good because I'm recording.
I know, so I'm not telling you. You can eat all the soup you want, but I'm not telling you the recipe.
That's fair enough.
Hole there.
It's like a bowling ball.
Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Just hanging out at the Frozen Snot with the Hillside Slider. I don't know if you ever heard about this guy before, but I don't think he tries to slide down every hill, but he does. And yeah, tell him about it, Dave. Tell him about the Hillside Slider.
The taller you are, the farther you fall. So you just slide on your butt. So every year I've done this race, I say I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I do it anyhow.
Here he is.
I slide on my ass. Usually it's bad. So the first year I almost went to the reservoir. Ended up upside down on a tree and climbed my way up. And Mira looked at me and then laughed and ran off. It was awful. And then the second year I fell in the same spot, but not nearly as bad. But this year I fell a totally different spot. It took a tree branch up my, I got an extra hole.